buddy James Drake here, and wanted to let you in on a test that we did here at Skytheory Studio in Denver the other day. And the idea was, I've got a grip truck with a variety of lights, Kino, Fluorescent, LED, Tungsten, and we wanted to kind of put them in a similar environment and check out what I would call the nature of the light. It's not so much about output or color temperature, although those are, of course, important things to consider, and they are notated here for you to have some takeaways there. But really, the nature of the light. You know, how does it wrap? What's the shadow look like? If you were going to set this up, what are you going to get out of it? That was kind of the idea. There's a couple notes. There's about 30,000 ways that we could have gone with this test, and even when we were setting up the test, we had a couple discussions, and we really had to talk things through to figure out what our takeaways were going to be. And so one of the differences in some of these lights is two of the lights had softboxes, one of them being the Cobalt 400 HMI, and then the other one being the ILED 150 softbox. And the reason we had softboxes on those is because I would never use them bare bulb on a subject ever. The 400 you might use as like an edge, or you would blind your person. It's just too much light. And this LED was designed to work with a softbox. So if you're wondering why those are the only two lights that had softboxes, my purpose was to use the light practically. So let's start by looking at these Kinos. First up, we got our Kino Diva 400. No modifiers on it, and we did all of the lights at two distances, 84 inches and then half at 42 inches. Let's check this out. We've got here at 84 inches, and we can see that there's kind of a nice looking shadow here. It's definitely not a terrible looking image, and you could get away with this fine. And you're at a T4 at 84 inches. I mean, that's a decent amount of exposure depending on your setup and what you need. So if we half the distance of the light, then that brings us to a 5/6. So we've gained a full stop. You can see that you've gained a really interesting fall off here. You've kind of made this side a little more specular, and the shadow here is a little more contrasty. It's a little bit less general. But I would say that the shadows are softer. They say that as you get a light closer and closer to a subject, it gets softer. So you can see that that's definitely taking place here. It's getting a little bit more contrasty, whereas over here it's a little bit more general. And there's definitely a lot more light going on here. Still looking at our base example of our Kino Diva 400 here. Let's see what that looks like up against the 4-bank at 84 inches. Pretty interesting. So the 4-bank obviously is a 4-foot wide light, and it's a much bigger source, and you can see that the shadow is quite a bit softer here. It's nice looking fall off, and just in general, the nature of this light feels a little bit softer. If we do that same push in with the Kino 4-bank to 42 inches, we're really starting to get pretty dramatic lighting here and really pretty soft shadows. Pretty nice looking test. You'll notice so far too, the color temperature between these obviously is consistent, and they're all real Kino bulbs. They're not the knockoffs or anything, so they're all pretty nice looking consistent bulb temperature here, and it's something to be considered. If you're lighting a big room and you need things to be dead on, then sometimes it's really nice to have all the matching stuff, and even Kino calls their bulbs true match, so I appreciate their attention to detail on that, because it certainly makes the coloring job easier in post if all your stuff matches on site. So just kind of taking a look here, we're at the Kino 4-bank 84 inches, and here at 42 inches at half the distance. So the difference in these two, you can even see, again, a little more general, just like with the Diva, and this is starting to get a little bit more dramatic. So pressing on here, we're into the LEDs, and you can see that there's a pretty significant color difference, but I'm going to forego talking about that at the moment, and also the obviously difference of light temperature or light output here at T2 versus where we were at T4. which is a 2-stop difference. But what's interesting about this LED, it's a circular light that's 20 or 21 inches across, is it's an edge-lit LED, and you can kind of see that it has an interesting kind of shape to the face there. We're now pushing in to 42 inches. We're up to a T4 on this 21-inch LED that's edge-lit. Kind of gives you a more dramatic look here. And just to compare, maybe we'll try to put the Kino forebank at 42 inches. What's that look like up against our ILED at 42 inches? It seems to me that the size of the source of this forebank is obviously giving quite a bit more wrap than the LED here. Now, it's not an exact comparison because where the center of the stand of this forebank is, the light's naturally going to have the opportunity to push out more around Dave's face, and this light being only 20 inches across is more limited, so it's not going to be able to get as much light over this direction. But again, this is kind of testing if you had these lights on hand and you set them up on a stand that was not supposed to rhyme, what would they look like? Next up, we got Dave's ILED softbox. And this is an interesting test. It kind of compares well with color with the other ILED. They kind of have a consistent feel to them as far as color tones go. You can see that has a little bit more output. It's a T2-28 split versus just a straight 2 of the other LED. What's interesting about this is when we move it in here, we're starting to really get that shape back. And again, I know it's hard to ignore the color here, but you can kind of see the nature of the light here. For this next one, I got to thank Dave for being a trooper and allowing us to blast him in the face with a ridiculous amount of light. The 650 right to the face is not all that kind to your eyes, so you can see he's squinting here. And it was pretty obvious to us from the beginning that this was going to be the hard light. Tungstens are, the Fresnels are always used kind of in that application. But it's an interesting test nonetheless to kind of see what the shadows would be doing differently. You can kind of see the shape of his nose shadow here is pretty defined. Even the shadow coming off the white card here, the color checker and all that is pretty sharp, pretty hard. But your output is also equal to what the forebank was at 42 inches. But this is all the way out at 84. In certain situations, that punchiness works. We did a shoot music video where we had to light a fairly small room with a 5-piece ensemble. You can imagine maybe 14 feet deep, maybe even less, maybe like a 12-foot deep room. And the only way we were really able to achieve the right look, the director wanted kind of a higher contrast, kind of tavern-looking scene. In order to get the pools of light to really work, we ended up going with a bunch of Fresnels so that we could get those pools of light to just exist in little pockets. And on the higher end, on big film sets, they'll maybe use like a Joe Lico that would, plug into an HMI, and then you can shoot that very narrow beam of light, high intensity, wherever you need it. But the Fresnel is kind of, perhaps more commonplace. Everybody's got ARRI kits, it seems. Obviously, could have thrown some diffusion on this, softened things up a little bit, but just out of the box, or on a stand, if you will, that's kind of what you'd get. Now, if we bring the light in, the 650 Fresnel in, you can really see, obviously, the intensity is way up there. And the shadow hardness, if you will, when you're comparing the two between the 84-inch and the 42-inch distances, the light is small enough that the size of the source doesn't really soften the shadows all that much. So even though you're having the distance, it's important from my notes to remember that the sharpness of this shadow, while it is slightly softer, the source itself is small enough that it's not making a gigantic difference between the two of these. You can also notice Dave put his glasses on because we're now at an 11. He's getting roasted. Our last light up in the mix here is the HMI 400. Again, this is on a softbox. It's not blasting him in the face, but it's still at a 5.6 at 84 with a softbox, so obviously a lot of light output there. And last up, we got the 42-inch distance with the 400 HMI on the Chimera softbox, size small. See the light output's pretty crispy there. Dave had to get his glasses on, as he should. And you can tell between the two of these, when you're having the distance, the softbox is really, the closer you get that thing, just softens it like crazy. You can really see here is a defined kind of nose shadow, and on this side it's just like fluffy clouds of shadow over here. So this is really where you see that softening of the shadows take place, when your source obviously matches or exceeds the size of your subject. That's where the distance really plays in a lot. Well, I hope you guys have enjoyed this walkthrough tutorial, not really a tutorial, I guess, of all these lights. Check out the blog, scroll around, compare them yourself. Let me know what you think in the comments. And hopefully, if this is well received, then we'll press on. And there's so many angles we could take with this. I mean, we didn't even touch light modifiers or gels or color temperatures. And obviously, there's many, many lights that we could compare. So if you guys are interested, maybe we can continue on and do some more of those. And thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you next time.